For over 10 years, we at Climate One have been engaging policymakers, influencers, entrepreneurs, and activists and scientists in broad, respectful, candid conversations about everything climate. Food, energy, water, technology, transportation, housing. We've had huge success bringing together people who think they're on opposite sides of issues. When they sit down and have a candid conversation, they often find common ground and the basis for real solutions. We're emotional beings. Thoughtful, inclusive conversations create the conditions in which the changes we want to see become possible. So I want to hear from you. When you talk about climate, how do you talk about it? More importantly, what do you want to be talking about? With whom? Join the conversation. Even make your own video. Invite your friends to join you. Let's talk climate. Live stream discussion. I'm real excited to be here with you and Erin Brockovich. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I would like to acknowledge the Ohlone and Miwok people who inhabited these lands for 10,000 years. And we'd love to hear from you, so please share your questions in the comments of the live stream, or you can tweet them at us using our handle @Climate One. We hope everyone's staying safe and healthy these days. We're recording today's conversation for the Climate One radio show and podcast. It drops every Friday. You can subscribe wherever you get your pods. My guest today is an environmental icon.
Erin Brockovich became a household name when a film about her fight for a small town was released on the big screen 20 years ago.
The movie told the true story of a single mum's fight to get justice for victims of corporate environmental pollution.
Julia Roberts played the tough and relentless paralegal who brought PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, to its knees.
These people don't dream about being rich. They dream about being able to watch their kids swim in a pool without worrying that they'll have to have a hysterectomy at the age of 20.
Today, Brockovich is on a new case, this time in Midland, Texas.
Like you're a real-life superhero. You're like water Batman.
A cancer cluster in Northeast Houston is getting the attention of well-known environmental advocate Erin Brockovich.
How are you getting involved in the crisis in Flint, Michigan? How did you first find out about it?
From the community. About a year ago, they contacted me.
We will fight water pollution. We will fight air pollution. We will find our way.
Erin Brockovich, welcome to Climate One. It's great to have you here.
It's really nice to be here. Thank you. And I want to share with everybody up north and the whole state of California and Oregon. And I hope you're staying safe and well. And it's a rough time. So I hope everybody is taking care of themselves.
Yeah, we were saying before we came on that you have a son who had to evacuate in Oregon. How are you and your family doing?
Well, I'm down in Southern California. I was part of the Woolsey fire, so we had the Northern California fires, Paradise Camp Fire, then the Woolsey fire. And even today, when it gets smoky, I'm in this kind of mode. So my defenses are like up and I'm very alert. We're very, very, very smoky. The air quality is not good. We're definitely watching what's happening up north in Oregon, and it's worrisome. It's sad. And I hope everybody's just, paying attention and taking care of themselves. Matthew is fine right now, but Oregon is taking it pretty hard.
Yeah. You write about how fossil fuels are disrupting where people live, how they live. And I've been thinking about climate change full time for 13 years. There's something different about when we start to breathe it into our lungs. And I'd like to hear, how experiencing climate change is different than anticipating climate change.
That's an excellent question. And because we are experiencing it, because it's not an isolated situation in one country or one part of the state, it's becoming everywhere. And seeing is believing. I think climate change has been something that's been difficult for people because you can't really see it. We think of climate and it's air and where is it? It reminds me when I was out in Hinckley and I was looking at the two-headed frog and the green water. And that visual meant everything to me. And so I talk about climate change a lot. And I had a picture that was sent to me 2 days ago up in Chico at noon. It was dark, but yet it was orange. It was a moonscape. If you don't know what climate change is, that picture shows you. And we're visual. Most of us are. And what's happening now for all of us, we've seen the fires in Australia. We've certainly experienced them on the West Coast. I let people know, if you can think of it as a weather phenomenon, because you can almost visualize a tornado or a hurricane or a fire and what the climate change and the global warming has done. And I let people know, because they don't always see it. Somebody asked me, but what does water have to do with climate change? And I'm like, okay, well, that's an excellent question. I'll try not to be frustrated, because I'm like, oh my gosh, climate is water. And that is something that I hope you visualize. I mean, part of what's happening here is we've been in this drought. And so we have less water. We talk about in the book, in Johannesburg, South Africa, they were literally going to have no water. So climate change is about too much water, not enough water, no water, drought, flooding. And the conversation is really gearing up, and it's always been there. But I believe the conversation's getting bigger because it's affecting everyone, and they're actually visually experiencing and seeing a result. And it can be suffocating, and it's frightening, and the losses can be great. So I hate to say it, the movie Twister, and I don't know who saw it, but Bill Paxton is watching the storm coming, and one of his workers comes up and is referencing, oh, you can see it. He says, oh my gosh, it's coming. And Bill Paxton that moment stopped, and he said, it's already here. And so I think it's becoming real because it's tangible, it's touchable. You're running from it, you're breathing it, you're swimming in it, you could be drowning in it. I just think it's here. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it is dramatic. And I'm often struck with Rachel Carson. And again, I quote this in the book, Superman's Not Coming, but she talks about how man has the fateful power to alter nature. And that's a battle that will not be won by us. And instead of trying to continue to alter that, rather we look to ourselves and master and alter our responses, our solutions, and our actions. And it just amazes me that she said this in 1963, and what was happening in the 60s, and where did we not hear or heed a warning, and how we get better at that, because climate change will be about our response, our preparedness, our defending ourselves, and not just thinking that because you can't see it, that it's not going to happen.
So does that mean the power is inward? Because so much of climate and environmentalism is about changing people's minds, changing other people, changing other parties, other states, et cetera. So am I hearing you say that, like, look inward first for power and change, rather than shaming oil companies or Republicans or things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be foolish for us to think whether you're Republican or Democrat, you can or can't be involved in this issue, or that industry or the fossil fuels can't. This will be something that collectively we got to drop that and work together. And I think that the thread or finger pointing or the name calling, all of that isn't serving any purpose other than getting two sides to stand down. And I want to find a way to break through that. We're all going to have a seat at this table. And here's the thing that I think is frustrating. We do have the technology, and companies can step in here and work with the people. And so it's an inward moment where you're like, okay, I'm not going to engage in this, but I am going to engage in how I can get you to come together, to work together for a situation on this planet that will affect us all. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. It doesn't matter if you're industry or we as a community. What's going to matter is that we recognize it, with stop with the name calling. Somebody just, put the sword down and let's work collectively. We have to be collective on this issue for the entire planet, which is the entire human species.
And our country recently has had a real racial reckoning and awakening with, the racist, embedded racism, structural racism in our country today and in the past. I'd like to ask you about, in 2017, the Pawnee Nation filed a lawsuit against more than 25 oil and gas companies operating wastewater injection sites near their homes in Oklahoma, a state that's very dear to you. What's that case about, and what's its significance?
Well, I think the biggest significance is, we definitely see these communities that haven't been heard or that we're not listening to them. They feel suppressed and oppressed, and socioeconomic factors, and there's a whole host of reasons, whether they don't have access to computers or school or education, that they've been underestimated and set aside, but they're starting to really collectively find their voice. And the Pawnee Nation was terribly affected by the earthquakes that was coming from the fracking and left and forgotten. So I work with the law firm, Weitz and Luxenberg, that had gone out there to help represent them. And we see these issues playing themselves out. Fracking is, oh my gosh, there's so much that people don't know about fracking. And we talk about that in the book. And the book is so important because I feel we're able to talk in a layman's term so that you can understand it. Because once we understand it and we get it, we'll take action. And the Pawnee Nation was terribly devastated, and their water has been impacted, and they feel very forgotten. And we're in a moment where they're speaking up. They're speaking out. We're all starting to see it. I've seen it on the ground for 20 years, and it's very hurtful. And what happens is somehow they get convinced that their voice won't matter, and they'll back off for a while. And out of fear and feeling less than and how they've been treated. And that just simply has to stop. And again, like climate change, we have to see. And that has been my gift to me, to be on the ground and to be able to be with them and see and touch and know that this is happening. And their voice, they're starting to find that, and they're also getting support. That is very key, that they have the support of us or the support of a community. So they were very impacted, and that lawsuit is still ongoing to try to get recovery for them because they were devastated by the earthquakes, and they're being devastated by the pollution caused by fracking.
How have you benefited from white privilege?
Oh my gosh. I've been blessed in so many ways. I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas, and I was blessed to enjoy the freedom and outdoors. Certainly at the time, blessed to have clean water, access to good health, education. I've been beyond blessed. And it every day in my line of work is when I do go out there and see that, especially when I was blessed with clean water and clean land and clean air. And we all deserve that. My father was the very one that taught me. He was a Republican man from Kansas, and he ran the pipelines. And I know he saw things, and he taught me that the greatest gifts we all have, everybody, is clean water, clean land, our air to breathe, our health, and our family.
Right, you write about how you used to sing it's water down by the creek. That was very sweet. One day, Lori Popp turned on the tap in her home in southern Arizona, and brown water came out.
Yes.
What's her story, and how is that a cautionary tale?
Oh, well, it's a big one. So for a whole lot of reasons, I always have to collect my thoughts, or I could just sit here and talk for the next 2 hours about this one issue. So in the book, we share a collage of photos that come in. They've come in from every single state in the United States and multiple cities. And the green water, I'm telling you, is chromium-6. I've not been wrong on that. We've had you could argue with me about that all day. I'm going to tell you, nope, chromium-6. And I can tell you right around 1 ppm what color it's going to be. It has a color in water. And then when we see the brown waters and the dirty waters, the black waters, oftentimes we have oil and gas issues. We have tank farms that are leaking. They've come into their backyard, people on well water. But generally across the board, we're seeing these watercolors because we're adding ammonia to the system. And we're not treating the dirt appropriately at the municipality. And what's worrisome about those photos is generally often in there is lead. We have 18 million miles of pipeline, of lead pipeline, that we need to address our infrastructure. So regarding that color of the water, it's telling us several things: infrastructure issue, pollution issue, bacterial issue, lead issues, and that the water is not being treated appropriately at the municipality. So the best way to explain it, and I have clearly learned because I go through this, when you start talking scientific, I'm like, I can't deal with this. And I see communities do the same thing. They almost like glass over. They're like, oh no, we're going to have to, what? It took me a year to learn to say perfluorooctanoic acid. I mean, I was like, So we were at a meeting, and Robert Bocock, who I work with, is probably one of the greatest water experts around. And I'm not kidding. And he was talking about organic matter. And I could just see the audience go, or what is that?
Organic tomatoes. That's what I think, right?
What is that? So I said to Bob, so Bob, what is organic matter? And he goes, dirt. And so everyone's like, that I get. Dirt, I get. So as water comes in, it has dirt in it, right? And they have to add chlorination because we don't want to have E. coli outbreaks and things like that. But what a lot of people don't know, and here's a big message: we need to know our water. We need to understand water. And when we do, it changes everything. So organic matter and chlorination create a very toxic compound known as trihalomethanes, which is very regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act. Now, if we would follow the Safe Drinking Water Act when we can't balance the system and can't keep our THMs controlled, is the appropriate filtration system. But we don't like to do that because we want to do things cheap and take these shortcuts. We can't take shortcuts on water. So adding ammonia to the system can reduce chlorination less effective. And then we have a whole situation happening in the distribution system, which most people don't realize is unregulated. A lot of stuff goes on in there. But when the water becomes corrosive and you have lead pipes, it causes the pipes to pit, and all the iron and the manganese leaks out. That's often what you're seeing when it's coming out of the pipes. But come with it is the lead. So the lead is a huge issue. And if we could change adding ammonia and follow the Safe Drinking Water Act and guidelines for filtration, we would save infrastructure, which is in great need of repair. We all know we're going to have to do something about our infrastructure. And we would have less lead contamination and less Legionnaire outbreaks. We are definitely seeing more Legionnaire outbreaks. We are definitely seeing more lead contamination. We're working on the lead and copper rule. Congressman Dan Kildee has been amazing with that up in Flint, Michigan. And this was a policy written a long time ago that said you could test for lead in water once every 4 years and average the sample. What? We could be missing a whole lot of stuff going on. So for the person that sees that color of water, generally that is one of the number one cause of why you're seeing that discoloration of water. And we really need to get back to basics. We need to, on the upfront, take care of our infrastructure, safety, and people first.
Speaking of lead, we have a question from listener David Romano who asks about artificial turf replacing grass on playing fields, and lead is a concern there. Some of those things are made from old tires. Your take on artificial turf as a replacement to natural grass?
That is a great question. I've had many soccer moms come to me whose kids have been on artificial turf, and the PCBs and the lead and the mercury and a whole lot of issues going on, and off-gassing, and children and those playing football on soccer down on that ground with cancer. So it is, there's some big studies going on. I'm aware of some communities. I'm working with them. And this is going to be one of those situations where there's probably going to be some lawsuit that's going to push back on that. They can be very dangerous. And that I'm really so glad somebody asked that. That was out of the blue. You are correct. And we'd just be better off playing on good old natural grass. So there are issues, and I think that's something that many universities and schools, and as we learn more and we talk about this more, that we'll stop doing that.
If you have, for those, we have a couple hundred people listening. If you have further questions, you can write them in the comments section on the live stream. If you're just joining us, we're talking, my guest today at Climate One is Erin Brockovich. She's the author of the new book, Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis and What We the People Can Do About It. So speaking about water, Erin, a lot of people, you've talked about water. How is electricity generation and water linked? People don't realize that nexus, but it's very important.
The hydro dams.
And mercury and power plant, a lot of power plants are located near water for cooling.
Correct. Well, pollution, chrome 6, and as you said, mercury, hydro dams. We've been in a lot of that with electricity and water and the issues they cause. We've been successful in some communities stopping that, other communities not, but it can become an absolute issue. And we do talk about that.
In 2003, you and Edward Masry, your legal collaborator then, filed a suit against Beverly Hills Unified School District for allowing contractors to operate a cluster of oil wells on campuses. You claimed that 300 cancer cases were tied to the wells, but a judge ruled the claims were unproven and the school district was reimbursed for nearly $500,000 in legal fees. Your thought on that? Because some people would point to that as a case where overreaching, perhaps with financial incentives. Mm-hmm. Your case wasn't proven.
Well, there was a lot of arguing with science on that. So, and I had that conversation with the attorneys because the issue for me was Sempra Energy and their cooling towers that sit right on top of that campus, and here's the ball field. So we definitely had an oil derrick, and the oil derrick, let me talk about that, is and was a problem. Beverly Hills School District has recently come back to me and asked me to help because they've removed the oil derrick. We were right about that issue. There's a lot of directional drilling that goes on. It's like a whole world under there. And the number of kids coming from Beverly Hills High in a time frame of about 10 years is way more than 300. It's over 1,000. So I don't make this stuff up. And we need to look at these patterns and these numbers, and they're all in the same location and they all have cancer. That's something that needs to be looked at. And so at the time, they were assuming or believing that the oil derrick was causing these issues. And I did a lot of testing in that area with Summa canisters, and we were finding high levels of benzene, but the science became a big argument in court. And so it ended up settling. And I believe had we focused on the hexavalent chromium and the cooling tower, you would have started seeing a better correlation of these illnesses. So this is a school that had an oil derrick on it and Sempra Energy right on top of it. The oil derrick has now been removed. But guess what? They have a big problem now, because once it's been removed, they are quite well aware they have a huge methane issue. Huge. And what they're concerned about is the subway that's going to come through and underneath that school. What could happen? It just doesn't make sense to me. LA at one time, I believe, was the third largest oil reserve in the US. It was just nothing but oil derricks. That oil and crude, and it seeps out, is in the ground, in the environment, under the school, high levels of methane. That thinking, building a school on top of that, having your children at school on top of that, and now running a subway under it with potential methane explosion and or issues just isn't a good idea. And so that's what happened there. And I had a second part to answering that. I will always be glad that we spoke out about that and that people now know this is something that Superman's not coming. And parents should know that information, and so they can better defend their children. We've seen a very similar situation that's happening up in upstate New York. And these moms have not let up, but they are now finding themselves in court because it's a huge cleanup process, and it's mercury, and it's PCBs, and it's these chemicals. And they don't want the kids going there, and they want the school shut down, and they're making big progress. So we do need to pay attention to issues like that. And it did settle. And I understand why people think that, but that's not what was going on. There is a real pollution problem there. There is a real Chrome 6 problem there. There are real people there, real students, kids, and they have actually been impacted. And there's more than 1,000 of them.
Well, more than 17 million Americans live within a mile of an active oil or gas well. And California Democratic senators recently killed a bill to ban oil and gas drilling within 2,500 feet of schools. And some of those Democratic senators, including Bob Hertzberg, Ana Cabrero, and Bob Hueso, received nearly $150,000 from oil and gas companies. Ventura County, I don't know if that's where you are, just passed 2,500-foot setback for oil wells. So this has been a national issue in Colorado, other places, trying to get some kind of a buffer zone. Where do you see that happen? Where do you see the status of that buffer zone around oil and gas wells, particularly schools?
Well, I think we should. And I think that you're going to see more about it and more better result with that, because the moms are starting to speak up and speak out. And like I told you, we're starting to see that effect in upstate New York. And that is one thing that is a big, huge game changer. When the moms, and it's always a mom, she's like, I don't like that. I mean, I don't like an oil well. You don't even have to sit here and get into a scientific debate on the issue. It's an oil derrick. It's an oil field. It's an oil pipeline. We know what oil is. There's BTEX in there. You worry about benzene. You worry about off-gassing. You worry about an accident. You just don't want it in that close proximity to your children and the school. So I think the real change will come from the conversation, the rise of moms, the rise of parents, the rise of community, getting in even at a local city council level and saying, this is what we want, and this is frankly what we're going to demand for the safety of our children.
We have another question from Vanessa Caroline, listener. She asks, in addition to fighting the good fight for changes in our water rules, is there a way to protect ourselves in our homes from questionable municipal water purifiers? What can an average person do about the water in their home?
That's a great question. And one of the first steps we tell people is know your water source, know your municipality. And if you haven't been getting a water quality report in your bill, you need to call them and you need to get them. We can't tell you what to filter, what filters to buy if you don't know what's in your water, because each chemical responds to a different, resin or carbon or coconut shell. We've always said reverse osmosis can be one of the best ways to protect yourself at home, whether it's a home system, countertop system, under the sink map. There are concerns with that the minerals are taken out. You can add the minerals back. There's definite question as you dispose of the reverse osmosis canister that the chemicals or compounds that are in there, how we dispose of them. But it is one of the safest ways to protect yourself at your tap. And really, the first way to protect yourself at the tap is know your water, know what's in your water, and from there begin to pick out the appropriate filtration. If you're looking to reduce the smell of chlorination, that alone will not clear out if you have any levels of lead or PFAS, which is a firefighting foam, or hexavalent chromium, or TCE. Know your water, know what's in your water, then you can begin to make the appropriate steps on what type of filtration that you would need to have at your home to better protect yourself.
In Flint, Michigan, kind of the iconic water contamination story, with a lot of racial discrimination. Recently, there's a $600 million settlement with 80% of the funds going to people who were under 18 at the time of the crisis. Is that a just settlement? And in your view?
I see these communities. I still talk to people out in Hinckley. Yes, the money and that settlement is a form of justice. In Flint, having a grand jury and those that knew and said nothing, to see them be sentenced, to be reprimanded for that egregious behavior, has been some justice. The national attention and the media and the story rising has been some justice. And when they get the money, yes, it feels like some justice, but it's very bittersweet, because the scars are left, especially for the children of Flint and their future, or neurological problems or learning disabilities. And the money is there to help how the family can get them the appropriate care that they need, or tutoring that they need, and getting them on with life. And for them, ultimately, justice would have been that this never happened. Everybody in Hinckley feels the same way. What good is the money going to do you when I have cancer and I'm going to die?
And we should clarify for those, the movie came out 20 years ago. Hinckley was the town where you got your start, is portrayed in the film, where there's Chromium-6, Pacific Gas and Electric. So, yeah.
In Flint, they switched river waters. Flint was a perfect storm. And in a way, PG&E was a perfect storm. PG&E was groundwater, well water. The PG&E Hinckley, California, Aaron Brockovich film was a corporation knowing and hiding the information. And this is, my father always taught me, deception is the root cause of so many of our downfalls. And in Flint, it was another perfect storm. They switched river water, and they knew. The women of Flint contacted me 1 year before anyone really knew what we know Flint to be today. I happened to be out of the country, and you kind of have to sometimes read between the lines what somebody is saying to you. And I was like, no, this isn't right. So I sent it over to Bob Bocock, who I work with and is a water expert. And he emailed me back and he said, I'm leaving tomorrow. And we wrote an entire water protocol for them on what not to do. They did it anyway. And they knew. That is such a sock in your gut. We really, I think that, we'll talk about, okay, I'll get a corporation doing that. But the idea that your municipality or anybody in the health department or in an agency, all the way up to the governor, would in fact not inform you of that, and knowing children would be harmed, is really a slap in the face.
Well, a lot of people would say it's about race.
Well, and I can understand that, because they underestimated that community. They underestimate the race, and they think because of your socioeconomic situation, or because you don't have the education, or because of this, that you're never going to figure it out. And and they've underestimated this situation. And that should, now,
Happens a lot in communities of color. Poor. It also happens sometimes differently in wealthy communities. And the largest natural gas leak in U.S. history occurred in 2015 at a storage facility in Porter Ranch in Southern
Aliso
California. Aliso Canyon. The impact of the climate was the equivalent to annual emissions from 500,000 cars. You supported a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of residents. Where does that stand?
That stands in a pretty good place. It's going through its process and discovery. There's some records coming out that really aren't very good for the oil and gas company and Sempra Energy. And this is, again, something that's really good to talk about. And it does affect all communities. So it's moving along. It will settle. I was out there. I don't live far from there. And the thing that is so frustrating, we need to look at our infrastructure, not only in water, but our oil and gas and these abandoned fields and what nobody knows what's going on under there until we have a big disaster like this that you did in Aliso Canyon. This is what Beverly Hills is upsetting. When we know these situations are here, I honestly don't know why we don't plan, prepare, find the solution, fix the problem. Why do we wait for the disaster? And that's what happened in Aliso Canyon. And I was out there. Other people were out there. Whoever they are, would be Southern Cal Gas, skeptics, sometimes the media, whether we get a sensational moment or not, you couldn't possibly be experiencing that. This drives me crazy. And I said earlier about the science argument, because I was on the phone with a scientist, and he said, well, let's be honest, Aaron. You don't have the data to conclude that this did cause that to people. You know what? You're right. I don't. I do not have a problem telling you that I was wrong or something happened or that I'm sorry. And listen, I said, you're right. I don't. But here's what part of science doesn't seem to want to answer. You don't have all the data either. So how can you conclude it doesn't? So when you have a community like an Aliso Canyon or Beverly Hills or Flint or Hinckley, and we could go all over the country, when they are telling you, the very people breathing it, drinking it, experiencing it over a huge dose in a short term or a medium amount of contaminant over a long range, why do we not look and listen? Because right there, you're learning something about the impacts of what that gas, an abandoned field, water pollution, municipalities not paying attention does to the people, because that's where we're going to learn. And I just, honestly, Greg, I go nuts over this. We are talking about poisons. We're well aware of them. We've studied a lot of them. And for us to ingest them and inhale them and drink them just generally doesn't lead to a very good outcome.
Well, Europe has the precautionary principle where things have to be proven before they can go in the market. Our system is more like you get away with it until 20 years later. There's enough people that have cancer you can.
Because it's ass backwards. It's an ass backwards system, and I truly believe that. We talk about in the book, and one of the perfect examples is the PFOA, which is most people know as Teflon, PFOS, which most people know as the firefighting foam. This is 3,000 different chemicals that have created the PFC family group. We've got a family of chemicals. This is exactly what happened and why I just said the system is ass backwards. 3M knew that this chemical was a bad actor, and they notified the agencies. So the agencies created a guideline, 400 parts per trillion, and you can run it through your water up to that point. We go about our business, right? They commission a study, and science takes time. Science can take 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. So here we go. About 4 years ago, as it's being studied, the conclusions come in. Yep, this causes cancer and diseases. To make matters worse, the study got hidden. You had to fight to get it to come out. Why on earth would we go through that, wreak havoc on the environment, the water, human health, and life, when on the upfront, you should be saying, I want to see a study first. before I put this into the marketplace and expose the people or the environment, I want to see the study first. But we don't. We do that at the end. It doesn't make sense.
And for those who like movies, Dark Waters, starring Mark Ruffalo,
Yes.
gets into that in an excellent way. If you're just joining us, I'm Greg Dalton at Climate One, and my guest is Erin Brockovich. Her new book is Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis, and what we, the people, can do about it. I'm going to go to right
Yes.
I'm going to go to our lightning round and ask you, Erin Brockovich, first some true/false questions, and then some.
Oh, no.
So, true or false? You wear clothing made with Gore-Tex.
It's probably going to be true. I mean, some of the things I've put on, until we read the labels, we oftentimes don't know. And I am definitely guilty of that. And I'm probably going to say true. I go into the grocery store and I look at some of the stuff and I'm like, ew, I didn't even know that was in there.
True or false? Your kitchen has pots and pans lined with Teflon or similar no-stick coatings.
Well, absolutely, there will be. And I try to get rid of them because I like cast iron. So, yeah.
Beauty, true or false? Beauty pageants empower women.
I was in a couple. I'm going to say no.
True or false? True or false? White people are more likely than people of color to be represented by plaintiffs' attorneys in environmental class action suits.
I don't want to believe that. Some people will say it's true. I work with many firms, and we absolutely represent people of color. That's just would not be acceptable to not do that. Could there be some out there? I don't know. Maybe.
True or false? Most of the law partners you interact with at plaintiffs' firms are white.
Yes.
Association, I'm just going to ask you, mention a person, place, or thing, and ask you to get your first phrase or word that comes to mind, unfiltered. I don't think we have to worry about the unfiltered.
You could be a lot of F-bombs getting ready to come out. So I'm saying, get ready. I'm serious.
EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler.
Call me. Please, we need to talk.
Joe Biden's position on fracking.
I'm not sure. And that's an honest response.
One word or phrase that describes how you felt carrying the Olympic torch in Salt Lake City in 2002.
Oh my God. And then that is not going to be the first thing into my head. Scary, amazing. And here's why. And it is what I so want to do, is pass that torch to everybody. I was so nervous. I didn't know where to run, who to talk to. It was raining. Oh my gosh, there's cameras here. I wore mascara. What was I thinking? This isn't about makeup. But I was like, just, and I'm like, I'm scared. I don't want to do this. And so they told me to start running and pick your pace up. And I am. And I'm thinking to myself, where do I go? What am I supposed to do with this thing? What if I drop it? Oh, this is just the worst case scenario. And they said, you need to turn around, Erin, because it's coming. You need to turn around and get ready. And I'm like, what? And I could hear him go, grab it. And I was like, what? And I got a hold of it. The minute I did, it was like, yes. I mean, it just became powerful, but sometimes we're afraid to grab it, or we're fearful that we can't do it. And I want you to know, once you grab it, you know where to go.
Last one, a woman of color who, like you, should be a household name because of her heroic environmental advocacy.
Give a name?
Yeah, who's a woman of color who's an unsung environmental hero in your view?
Well, that's an excellent question. I would have to. There's quite a few. There's so many of them in the communities that are unsung heroes. They're everywhere, and they're just everywhere.
One question we have from YouTube, a listener saying, what advice do you have for youth activists today who are looking to make a real impact on climate and water? You talk about passing the torch. What's your advice as you're passing that torch?
Get involved. And I'm talking to them. I'm working with them. I have one as an intern with me. The biggest message I could give them is everything that we've been talking about here. We label or judge or perceive based on it's like when I started my work in Hinckley, I'm very well aware of who I am. But I don't need to be reminded, you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not a scientist, you're a girl with blonde hair and your boobs are too big and your dress is inappropriate. What do you know? And I'm like, I don't have to be any of that to be a human and to tell you that I have a voice, what I see is wrong, and to stand up. And for our youth, to believe in yourself. We let negative noises get inside of our head. And I am so frustrated with this. It doesn't matter if you're right or left, black or white, rich or poor. You are great and you need to believe in yourself. And once you do, or you grab that torch, it becomes a moment where you get more information or a little more knowledge, or you get a little more confidence, or you get a little more support, that you just keep going and you just keep going and you just keep going. Don't ever let somebody get inside of your head. That happened to me because I'm a dyslexic. I was labeled stupid and underestimated and all of these things. We've got to stop underestimating people. And oftentimes the youth we don't always listen to because what? They're the youth. Absolutely not. You are valued. It doesn't matter. As I said, race, money. I mean, I talk about this assessments. We assess ourselves and who we are based on what? Money, fame, looks, what we drive. Really, let's take a look and assess who we are based on character and our courage and our strength, our persistence, our determination. That is what matters. And I don't want anyone to ever forget that, because I have seen it too much and I have experienced it, where you are oppressed, suppressed, pushed back, you don't matter, labeled, judged. Please, we need to stop that.
Do you think that being sort of marginalized by powerful people and probably men, did that make you more determined?
I just tell them off. You have to laugh, Greg. Sure it does. But I've also learned very early on, we need to understand emotions better and the human psychology better, and our self-esteem, self-doubt. And I do believe when you own that in yourself, these suppressive moments, and I've experienced them, that you want, because you're uncomfortable or you're not telling me something, that you want to project that onto me, and learning how, when you know yourself, boom, that I don't want to say the word Teflon because, that's just not a good thing, but that's your shield. You own you know it, and don't let that projection come back on you. So when that does happen to me, and it took me a long time to learn it, I'm like, why do you feel you need to do that? Because I know who I am. But what is it you know or don't know or are hiding? Just be honest. I am not afraid to be honest. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid to be wrong. And I own that. So when I do, you go ahead, give me your best shot. And that's oftentimes where we start to recoil. I've been there.
You talked about being marginalized as a pretty blonde woman. Were you ever tempted to use that as a tool for your advantage, to particularly when encountering men? And how?
Unconsciously, maybe, but not consciously, no. As I said, I was in beauty pageants. I didn't like that. I didn't care for that. In Hinckley, And I was definitely, when the film first came out, throwing back a little bit myself, comments about how I dressed. And I'm like, well, that wasn't intentional. But if you think, and I could see the other side thinking that I'm going to use that, then okay, yeah, fine. That's what I do. But if you ever spent a summer in Hinckley, I would have been better off running around naked. It's hot. And the less clothes I had on, it was like, all the time. But that struck me. And again, that's judging me by what I wear. And there's just some days I feel like dressing that way because I just feel, I don't know, spunky or fiery that day. It doesn't always have some meaning, but this is where the line in the film came from. The 634, you all know what, if you saw the film, comes from. If that's what you're just going to think of me, okay, well, then I'm just going to throw that right back in your face because that's not what was going on. And that's not what I'm consciously thinking. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm certainly a female. And there's days, I may want to do my hair prettier or like, I don't know, this looks kind of.
Yeah, shouldn't have to feel bad about
good.
that. Yeah.
Right.
Shouldn't have to feel bad about that.
You guys, great questions. Who knew this was going to come out of my climate conversation?
We have a question from Angelina Cook, listener. We have a question from listener Angelina Cook. How can disadvantaged rural alpine communities protect themselves against industrial carbon-intensive projects that aim to extract, export, and deplete local water resources? We are a lot of bottled waters being sucked out of the ground in communities that don't get much for it.
Yeah, no, I know there's a lot of issues with even Nestle. We have those coming to us. One thing that I do tell people that oftentimes we forget, it's really super important, is the collective. So follow the common sense we talk about, which is your logic. And start using your leverage. Oftentimes we think of leverage as, something really bad or somebody's going to leverage money or the oil and gas people are leveraging it. You get smart and you leverage your community. There's a great deal of power in there. There's a great deal of support. You can begin to network with other collective communities, and then it just gets bigger and bigger, and get down to your own city council level. This is super important, and people oftentimes don't realize. First of all, have you ever been to a city council meeting? Because if you show up, they're usually in there talking to themselves. And oftentimes they may really not know that the community's got this issue. We need to. And when you have that issue, like in the alpine communities, and we are seeing this happening, they're like going, yeah, no, I don't think so. They're joining with their communities. They're starting to create some ruckus in a good way at city council meetings where many permits can begin and end right at that level. By way of example, and it's not on this particular issue, but it's the same example. We talk about in Tonganoxie, Kansas, the moms. Tyson was coming in with the whole manufacturing plant. They did not want that. They were worried about water pollution. They were worried about what would happen to the community. And I'll tell you what, they geared up pretty fast. They got their facts. That knowledge became power. They made it their business to learn it, to understand it, to join the community, join forces, get to city council, work with city council who denied the permit. Boom. They ran them right out. That is the power of people. And that is the most important message I have learned my entire life in all my environmental work. It isn't just a person. It will be you, the person, where it starts to own where you want to go with your cause. You'll need the tools and steps to know how to fight. But when that collective comes in, that's where it can make a difference. Don't think that some magical oversight will trickle down to you to change the effects in your own backyard. You do that. Your community does that. Get to your city council. I am telling you, 10 times out of 10, we are seeing the biggest changes happening right at that microscopic place in your own backyard. Imagine if every one of us did that in every town and city, every city council, and began to address these issues and blew it up across America. We'd actually have affected change and solutions and made that difference.
Do you think that's really true? And as in the case of the 2,500-foot setback rule in California, fossil fuel interests seem to have influenced the Democrats who blocked that rule. You know, if government is bought by corporations, it takes a lot of people power to flip the balance.
It really does. And, you know, we had a similar situation up during the fires on some legislation. And that's the thing, you know, get involved in legislation. You got to actually read the bills. It's really very difficult. And this is where I want people to say, well, I don't know how to do that, or how would I do that, or I'm afraid to do that, because I will pick the phone up all day and say, really? Because what does this mean? You giveth and you taketh away. That we were actually able to get that, and in some instances shame them, and actually got it stopped. And so be vocal, and don't be afraid to utilize radio, social media, Facebook, Twitter. Put it out there, put the pressure on, and keep the pressure on. And that makes a very big difference, because you really got them in the hot seat. No means no, we're not doing this. They're banking oftentimes that you go away. Yes, there is an association that's too close, if you ask me. Somebody asked me once, who's worse, corporations or some governmental entities? I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe they sleep in the same bed. Honestly, it's hard to decipher that. Keep the pressure on. I could share with you so many examples. That one on the fire, it was a bad legislation. It would have gotten through. But you know what? Just boom, 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 boom. Keep it on, keep it on, keep it on. Up in Minnesota, they have horrible TCE contamination throughout that state. We've dealt with these communities. One community in particular, here they come, not going to have it. They engaged the media. They got social groups going. They got a local reporter going, and they didn't let up until just recently the governor said, okay, point made. The use of TCE in the state of Minnesota has now been banned. Keep the pressure on.
As we get to the end, I'd like to bring it back to climate. You write a lot about climate and Superman's not coming. And, you know, the impacts are here. They're severe. They're depressing. If you know the science, you know that there's a lot of momentum built up into the system. A lot of changes will continue. More fires, more floods, et cetera. Even if we shut off all the carbon, how do you hold that? How do you not give up or feel overwhelmed by that? Or do you? And then how do you work through it?
Because I believe in people, and I believe we are inherently great. And I believe, just born out of our love for our health, our air, our land, our water, our planet, our homes, our country, it resides within us to want to rise and to want to fight. There are days that you're not going to feel like it, but here's what I want you to do. Give yourself permission. Let me tell you, I've thrown myself on the floor and had a fit and said, I give up. But let yourself go there. Take some breaths, check back in with yourself, get back out into the environment. All of these things will remind you and renew you. Oh yeah, this is why I get up every single day. And just allow yourself that moment. And one thing that you're right. This just isn't going to be fixed overnight. But this is what we can do. And this is where we talked about in the book, Johannesburg, South Africa. They were going to run out of water.
Day zero.
They dubbed it Day Zero. But what they did is a shining example. They acknowledged, Houston, we have a problem. They just didn't kick the can down the road. The community was involved. They did their restrictions. They did what they needed to do. They worked with the government. They prepared. And because they listened, they didn't kick a can down the road. They acted, and it was hard to do the rationing that they did. They made the necessary changes that they were able to stop it, and they defended themselves. And because of that, they have water. Day zero could be here for any one of us. The climate change effect could be here for any one of us. But I certainly hope, and I believe that we are in a wake-up call. No more buying an illusion. This is about taking action. It is real. It is here. Be prepared. Acknowledge it. Even if it doesn't happen, what's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, well, at least you were prepared. What if it does happen? You're going to be really glad you prepared. We got to stop kicking the can down the road, have the conversation, look for the solutions, be prepared, work together, follow through on that. And we have ways to defend ourselves. And here's really something important. It's like a football game, right? Because you're going to get out there, be prepared, you're going to get knocked around. And we're here, we are. But when you pick the ball up and you get smacked down and they pick up 20 yards, you don't stop off the field and go, I quit, I give up. No, get back out there, pick that ball up. And I guarantee you, you'll be surprised. You could rush 50, 60 yards and you may get knocked down again. We need to follow through. You know, that is some of the problems that we do have. We have these rules and regulations. Our problem's been we don't follow through. And we need to begin to do that. And that step will begin with even admitting, well, damn, we have a problem and we better get together. And we have the technology, we have the means, we can find the money. We need the cooperation. We've got to stop this division and get busy acting like a team on that ball field. We can make it to our goal, but not if we don't acknowledge it, pick it up, and give it our best.
Great pep talk. I feel better talking with you this last hour than I did when it started. So I'm going to have to replay this or call you when I need a boost. I'd like to give a shout out to the Climate One team making this happen. This took a lot to get. I'd like to thank them for making this happen and Erin for being flexible. We've had to reschedule this. I'm Greg Dalton, and my guest today was Erin Brockovich. Her new book is Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis and What We the People Can Do About It.
That's what I'm saying.
It's an excellent read about water and more. And thank you, Erin. I'd like to really thank you for your courage and your work bringing power to people who don't have as much as others, and for energizing our audience today. Really, thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, I truly enjoyed it. Oftentimes I want to break out in the Beatles song, I am you, you are me, here we are all together. We are. I believe in us. We're always going to have some tough times. But if you even look back on so many situations, and I look back on so many of my communities, they inspire me. The people inspire me. They do have the gumption. They do have the fight. They do have the desire. And when they find themselves in their community, what they do is amazing. And I've really become like, yes, go. If you're looking for any permission from me to speak up and to rise up, you're absolutely going to get it. And oftentimes what people want is the support.